Amara Jenkins, 19 years old, climbed over the rusted iron fence of the abandoned mansion at 3 a.m. with a single purpose: to find a quiet place to end everything. She had lost her mother 6 months ago, no money for medicine, lost her brother 2 years ago, wrong place, wrong time, wrong color, lost her college scholarship last week, no one to pay the dormitory fees. She had nothing left except the weight of existing, and tonight she was ready to set that weight down forever. But when she pushed open the door to the grand hall, she didn't find emptiness. She found an old man sitting in the darkness, a bottle of pills in his trembling hand, moonlight catching the tears on his weathered face. "Did you come here to end or to begin?" His voice was hoarse, broken. "Because if you came to end, you'll have to wait. I was here first." Amara froze in the doorway, her own darkness colliding with his. She had expected cobwebs and silence, rats and decay, the kind of emptiness that would swallow her without witness. Instead, she found a man who looked like he had been swallowed by emptiness long ago and was still somehow breathing. He was old, maybe late 70s, wearing a suit that had probably cost more than her mother's entire medical debt. His white hair was disheveled, his eyes hollow, and the bottle in his hand caught the moonlight like a promise waiting to be kept. "I didn't know anyone was here," Amara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This place has been abandoned for years. 45 years. The old man didn't look at her, just kept staring at the bottle. "I haven't been back since 1979, since the night everything ended." He laughed, a sound like broken glass. "And now I'm back to end what should have ended then." Amara should have left, should have found another place, another darkness, another way to disappear. But something in his voice, something that sounded exactly like the voice in her own head, made her step forward instead of back. "What happened in 1979? The old man finally looked at her, and Amara saw something she recognized, the eyes of someone who had run out of reasons to stay. "My wife died in this room," he said quietly, "giving birth to our daughter. The baby died too. That's what they told me. Cord wrapped around her neck. Nothing anyone could do." He gestured at the grand hall around them, at the dust-covered furniture and the cobwebbed chandeliers. "I couldn't stay here after that. Couldn't look at these walls. Couldn't breathe this air. So I left. Built a company. Made billions. And spent 45 years trying to outrun a ghost that never stopped following me." He held up the bottle of pills, examining it in the moonlight. "Tonight, I stopped running. Tonight, I came back to where it all ended, to end it properly, to be with Margaret again, wherever she is." He looked at Amara with something that might have been curiosity. "And then you appeared, a stranger, in my haunted house, with eyes that look exactly like mine." He set the bottle down on the arm of his chair. "So I'll ask again. Did you come here to end or to begin?" Amara walked further into the room, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor, dust rising with each step. She could see the space clearly now. A ballroom, maybe, or a great hall, with a grand staircase sweeping up to darkness and a massive fireplace that hadn't held a fire in decades. In the corner, covered with a white sheet like a ghost, sat the hulking shape of a grand piano, and above the fireplace, barely visible in the shadows, hung a portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I came to end," Amara admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "I lost everyone, my mother, my brother, my future. I've been carrying them for so long and I'm tired. I thought if I found a quiet place, a forgotten place, I could just stop carrying." The old man nodded slowly, as if her answer made perfect sense. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "If we're both going to end tonight, we might as well have a conversation first. I haven't talked to anyone honestly in 45 years. It might be nice to do it once before I go." Amara sat. She didn't know why. Maybe because he was the first person in months who had looked at her without pity or judgment. Maybe because there was something comforting about being with someone who understood the weight she was carrying. Maybe because deep down she wasn't as ready to end as she thought she was. "What's your name?" the old man asked. "Amara. Amara Jenkins." "I'm Edward." He paused. "Edward Sterling." The name meant nothing to Amara at first. Then it clicked. Sterling Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest drug companies in America. She had seen their name on the bills that had piled up during her mother's illness, on the medications that had cost more than their rent, on the rejection letters from insurance companies that said her mother's treatment wasn't cost-effective. Edward Sterling wasn't just a lonely old man in an abandoned mansion. He was one of the richest men in the country, and his company had helped kill her mother. Amara felt something shift inside her. The first spark of anger she had felt in months, cutting through the numbness like a blade. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. She just looked at him, at this broken old billionaire sitting in the ruins of his past, and wondered what kind of universe would bring them together on the same night, in the same place, for the same purpose. "Why tonight?" she asked instead. "You've been alive for 45 years since she died. Why end it now?" Edward was quiet for a long moment. "Because I finally realized that everything I built was a lie," he said. "I told myself I was building something meaningful, Sterling Pharmaceuticals. We were supposed to help people, cure diseases, save lives. That's what Margaret would have wanted." His voice cracked. "But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about helping people. It became about profit margins and shareholder value and market dominance. I signed off on price increases that I knew would kill people. I approved policies that denied coverage to people who needed it. I built an empire on the bones of the vulnerable, and I told myself it was just business." He picked up the bottle again, turning it over in his hands. "Last month I got a report, a routine thing. Mortality statistics related to medication access, numbers on a page. But one of those numbers jumped out at me. Did you know that 6,000 people die every year in this country because they can't afford the medications they need?" He laughed bitterly. "I used to be one of those people. When Margaret was pregnant, we couldn't afford proper prenatal care, couldn't afford the good hospital. That's why she died, because we were poor, and being poor in America is a death sentence." He looked at Amara with haunted eyes. "I built Sterling Pharmaceuticals because I was angry. Angry that poverty had taken my wife and daughter. Angry that the system had failed us. I was going to change things, make sure no one else had to suffer the way we did, but instead..." He gestured at the bottle in his hand. "Instead, I became the system. I became the thing I hated. And 6,000 people die every year because of decisions I made, policies I approved, prices I set." He set the bottle down again, his hands trembling. "I can't undo it. Can't bring any of them back. Can't bring Margaret back, or our daughter, or any of the people who died because my company cared more about profit than about human lives. But I can stop being part of it. I can stop pretending that my existence isn't a net negative for the world." Amara listened to his confession with a strange mixture of fury and recognition. This man, this billionaire, this captain of industry, this architect of a healthcare system that had crushed her family, was sitting across from her, talking about guilt and regret and the desire to disappear. He had everything she had never had: money, power, the ability to change things. And yet he was just as broken as she was, just as lost, just as ready to end. "My mother died 6 months ago," Amara said quietly. "She had a rare blood disorder. There was a treatment, a medication that could have saved her life, but it cost $12,000 a month, and her insurance wouldn't cover it. We tried everything: GoFundMe campaigns, charity applications, clinical trials. Nothing worked. She died in a hospital bed, apologizing to me for being sick, apologizing for being a burden, apologizing for not being able to fight harder." She met Edward's eyes, and she saw the moment when understanding dawned, the moment when he realized what she was telling him. The medication, she continued, her voice flat and cold, was made by Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The insurance company that denied her coverage was a Sterling subsidiary. The clinical trial she was rejected from was run by Sterling Labs. She paused. So when you talk about the 6,000 people who die every year because of your company's policies, one of them was my mother. The silence that followed was absolute. Edward stared at her with an expression of dawning horror, his face going pale in the moonlight. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just sat there, frozen, as the weight of what she had said crashed down on him. "I didn't know," he finally whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know. The statistics, they're just numbers. I never thought about the individual people, the families, He stopped, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's not enough. Nothing could ever be enough. But I'm sorry." Amara had expected to feel satisfaction at his apology, expected to feel vindication or closure, or at least the hot rush of righteous anger. Instead, she felt something unexpected: emptiness. The man who had helped kill her mother was sitting across from her, apologizing with tears streaming down his face, and it didn't change anything. Her mother was still dead. Her brother was still dead. Her future was still gone. No apology, no matter how sincere, could bring any of them back. "I didn't come here to find you," she said. "I didn't even know who you were until you told me your name. I just came here to find a quiet place to die. And instead, I found the man whose company killed my mother." She laughed, a sound without humor. "The universe has a sick sense of irony." Edward wiped his eyes, his hands still trembling. "Maybe it does. Or maybe there's a reason we're both here tonight. Maybe we're supposed to stop each other." "Why would I want to stop you?" Amara's voice was sharp. "You just admitted that your company has killed thousands of people. Maybe the world would be better off without you in it." "Maybe it would," Edward agreed quietly. "But would the world be better off without you?" The question hit Amara harder than she expected. She had been so focused on her own pain, her own loss, her own reasons for wanting to disappear, that she hadn't thought about what her death would mean to anyone else. But who was there to mourn her? Her mother was gone. Her brother was gone. She had no other family, no close friends, no one who would notice if she simply stopped existing. "There's no one left," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "My mother was the last one. After she died, I tried to keep going. Finished high school, got into college, told myself I was doing it for her. But then the scholarship fell through, and I couldn't afford the dormitory, and everything just..." She trailed off, tears starting to fall. Everything just collapsed, like it had been held together by string, and the string finally broke. Edward watched her cry, and something shifted in his expression, the hollow despair giving way to something else. Something that might have been recognition, or compassion, or the first stirring of a purpose he had lost long ago. "How old are you?" he asked. 19. 19. He repeated the number like it meant something. "My daughter would have been 45 this year, if she had lived." He was quiet for a moment. "When Margaret died, I was 23. Younger than you are now. I thought my life was over. I thought there was no point in going on without her. But I did go on. I built things, made mistakes, caused harm I can never undo." He paused. "But I also did some good here and there. Funded research that led to cures, created jobs, donated to causes Margaret would have cared about. Not enough to balance the scales, not nearly enough, but something." He leaned forward, his eyes intent on Amara's face. "You're 19 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Decades of possibility, of potential, of chances to make things better, for yourself and for others. I'm 78. I've already made my choices, already done my damage. If one of us should end tonight, it should be me, not you." Amara shook her head. "That's not how it works. You don't get to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die." "No, but neither do you." Edward held her gaze. "You came here to end your life because you've lost everyone you love, because the system failed you, because you're tired and alone and can't see any reason to keep going. I understand that. I've felt that. But ending your life won't bring your mother back. It won't fix the system. It won't change anything except removing one more good person from a world that desperately needs good people." "You don't know if I'm good," Amara said. "I know you climbed over a fence at 3 a.m. to find a quiet place to die, and when you found a stranger planning to do the same thing, you sat down and talked to him instead of leaving." Edward smiled sadly. "That's more kindness than most people have shown me in 45 years. They sat in silence for a long moment, the darkness of the mansion pressing in around them, the moonlight shifting as clouds passed overhead. Amara could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The bottle of pills in her own pocket, the plan she had made, the end she had been seeking. But something had changed in the last hour. Something had cracked open inside her, letting in a sliver of light she hadn't expected to find. "I'm going to turn on a light," she said suddenly, standing up. "I can't keep having this conversation in the dark." She fumbled along the wall until she found a switch, not expecting it to work after 45 years of abandonment. But when she flipped it, a dim chandelier flickered to life overhead, casting the room in a warm, dusty glow. And in that light, Amara saw the portrait above the fireplace clearly for the first time. She stopped breathing. The woman in the portrait was young and beautiful, with warm brown skin and kind eyes and a gentle smile. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair styled in the fashion of the 1970s, a small gold locket around her neck. And she looked exactly like the woman in the photograph Amara kept in her wallet. The photograph of her mother as a young woman. Before life had worn her down, before illness had stolen her beauty, before the world had taken everything from her. "Who is that?" Amara's voice came out strangled, barely audible. Edward turned to look at the portrait, his expression softening with an ancient grief. "That's Margaret, my wife. The portrait was painted a month before she died, when she was 8 months pregnant." He paused. "She was the most beautiful woman I ever knew, inside and out. She used to say that beauty wasn't about how you looked. It was about how you made people feel. She made everyone feel seen, valued, loved." Amara walked toward the fireplace, as if in a trance, her eyes fixed on the portrait. It couldn't be. It was impossible. And yet the resemblance was undeniable. The same cheekbones, the same eyes, the same gentle curve of the smile. The woman in the portrait could have been her mother's twin. "My mother's name was Diane," Amara said slowly, her mind racing. "She was adopted. She never knew her birth parents. The adoption agency said her mother died in childbirth, and her father gave her up because he couldn't cope with the loss." She turned to face Edward, her heart pounding. "She was born in October 1979, in this city, at St. Mary's Hospital." Edward's face went white. "That's not possible. My daughter died. The doctor told me, the nurses told me, the cord was wrapped around her neck. There was nothing they could do. I saw the death certificate. I attended the funeral. I buried her next to Margaret in the family plot." "Then who did you bury?" Amara pulled out her wallet with trembling hands, fumbling for the photograph she carried everywhere, the picture of her mother as a young woman, the only image she had of what Diane Jenkins had looked like before life had stolen her joy. She held it up next to the portrait, and the resemblance was undeniable. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. "Because this is my mother, and she looks exactly like your wife." Edward rose from his chair on unsteady legs, walking toward Amara as if moving through deep water. He took the photograph from her hands and held it up to the portrait, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and a dawning hope so painful to witness that Amara had to look away. "Margaret," he whispered. "She looks just like Margaret." His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the photograph. But how? How is this possible? The doctors said she died. The nurses said she died. Everyone said... He stopped. His expression changed. And suddenly, he wasn't looking at the photograph anymore. He was looking at something far away, something 45 years in the past. "There was a nurse," he said slowly. "The night Margaret died. A young woman. I never knew her name. She was the one who told me the baby was gone. She was the one who handled all the paperwork, the death certificate, the arrangements. I was so broken, so destroyed by grief, that I signed whatever she put in front of me. I didn't question anything. I couldn't think. I couldn't function. I just wanted the pain to stop." He looked at Amara with dawning horror. What if she lied? What if my daughter didn't die? What if that nurse, for whatever reason, money, opportunity, malice, what if she took my daughter and sold her to an adoption agency? And I've spent 45 years mourning a child who was alive the whole time? The implications crashed over Amara like a wave. If Edward was right, if his daughter had survived, if she had been stolen and sold and raised by strangers, then that daughter was Diane Jenkins, and Diane Jenkins was Amara's mother, which meant, "You're my grandfather," Amara whispered, the words feeling impossible even as she said them. "My mother was your daughter. The daughter you thought died. She was alive the whole time. Living in poverty, struggling to survive, while you built a pharmaceutical empire and made billions of dollars." Her voice hardened. "And then she died 6 months ago because she couldn't afford the medicine your company makes." The weight of that realization hit them both at the same time. Edward's daughter, the baby he had mourned for 45 years, the loss that had driven him to build his empire, the ghost that had haunted him every day since 1979, had been alive, had grown up without him, had struggled and suffered and raised a daughter of her own, and had died in the end because of a system that Edward himself had helped create. The cruelty of it was almost too much to comprehend. Edward collapsed back into his chair, the photograph still clutched in his hands, his face contorted with grief. "She was alive," he said, his voice breaking. "My little girl was alive, and I never knew. I never looked for her. I just accepted what they told me and moved on." He looked at Amara with haunted eyes. "I could have found her. If I had questioned the story, if I had demanded answers, if I had been less broken and more suspicious, I could have found her. I could have raised her. I could have protected her." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I could have saved her." "You couldn't have known," Amara heard herself say, surprising herself with the words. "You were 23 years old. Your wife had just died. Someone you trusted lied to you. It's not your fault." "But everything after is my fault." Edward's voice was raw with self-loathing. "I built a company that put profit over people. I signed off on policies that denied coverage to patients who couldn't afford to pay. I created the system that killed her, that killed my own daughter, my own flesh and blood." He looked down at the bottle of pills still sitting on the arm of his chair. "I came here tonight because I couldn't live with the guilt of what I've done to strangers. Now I find out I've done it to my own family." He reached for the bottle, and Amara moved without thinking, crossing the distance between them, snatching the pills from his hand, hurling them across the room into the darkness. The bottle hit the wall with a clatter, and then there was silence. "No," Amara said, her voice fierce. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to find out you have a granddaughter and then leave her alone. You don't get to discover that your daughter was alive and then check out before you understand what that means." "What does it mean?" Edward's voice was hollow. My daughter lived a life of struggle because I wasn't there to protect her. She died in poverty while I had billions of dollars. What possible redemption is there for that? I don't know. Amara was crying now, tears streaming down her face. 45 years of loss and 6 months of grief, and one night of impossible revelation all pouring out at once. I don't know if there's redemption. I don't know if anything can make this right. But I know that I came here tonight to end my life because I thought I had no one left. And now I find out I have a grandfather. The worst possible grandfather. A billionaire whose company killed my mother. But still, family. Someone who shares my blood, my history, my loss. She knelt in front of his chair, looking up at his weathered face. I was going to die tonight. You were going to die tonight. But maybe the universe brought us together for a reason. Maybe we're supposed to save each other. Edward looked at her. This young woman, this stranger, this granddaughter he had never known. And something shifted in his expression. The hollow despair began to recede, replaced by something fragile and uncertain. Something that might have been hope. I don't know how to be a grandfather, he said quietly. I don't know how to be anything except a businessman. I've spent 45 years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance, refusing to let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. I don't know if I can change. I don't know how to be a granddaughter either, Amara admitted. I don't know how to trust people or accept help or believe that good things can happen. My whole life has been one loss after another. I don't know if I can believe in family when family has always meant people who leave. They sat there in the dusty light of the forgotten mansion, two strangers bound by blood and tragedy, both teetering on the edge of an abyss they had come here to fall into. And somehow, in the space between heartbeats, they made a different choice. My wife used to play piano, Edward said suddenly, gesturing toward the covered shape in the corner. Every night she would play, said it helped her think, helped her feel connected to something bigger than herself. After she died, I couldn't bear to hear music, couldn't bear to think about her sitting at that piano, her fingers moving over the keys, making something beautiful out of silence. He stood up slowly, his joints creaking with age, and walked toward the covered piano. With one motion, he pulled off the dust sheet, revealing the grand instrument beneath. A Steinway, beautiful despite decades of neglect, its black surface dulled by dust, but still elegant. Can you play? He asked Amara. My mother taught me. Amara's voice caught. She said her birth mother played, even though she never met her. Said she felt connected to her through the music. She made me practice every day, even when we couldn't afford to keep the piano and had to sell it. After that, I would practice at school, at church, anywhere I could find a keyboard. She walked to the piano and sat down on the bench, running her fingers over the keys without pressing them. Decades of dust rose at her touch, ghosts of music waiting to be released. One of the keys is stuck, Edward said, watching her. The B flat above middle C. It's been stuck since the night Margaret died. I never had it fixed. Couldn't bear to change anything about the last instrument she ever touched. Amara found the key and pressed it gently. It didn't move. 45 years of grief, frozen in a single note that refused to sound. What was her favorite song? Amara asked. Clair de Lune. Edward's voice was thick with memory. Debussy. She would play it every night before bed. Said it sounded like moonlight made into music. Amara knew the piece. Her mother had played it too, had taught it to Amara when she was 7 years old, had said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Another connection, another thread linking 3 generations of women who had never met but had shared the same music, the same soul. She began to play. The notes came slowly at first, her fingers remembering patterns they hadn't traced in months, the melody rising from the dusty piano like a spirit being summoned from sleep. The sound was imperfect. Some keys were out of tune, others sluggish from decades of neglect. But it was beautiful despite its flaws. beautiful because of them. And when she reached the part that required the B flat, Amara pressed the key with all her strength, and it moved. Unstuck after 45 years, the note rang out clear and true, joining the melody as if it had never been silent. Edward wept. Standing in the ruins of his past, listening to his granddaughter play his wife's favorite song on his wife's piano, he wept for Margaret and for Diane and for all the years he had lost. He wept for the choices he had made and the damage he had done and the redemption he wasn't sure he deserved. He wept for a stuck key finally released and a silence finally broken and a connection finally made. And when the song ended, when the last notes faded into the dusty air of the forgotten mansion, he walked to the piano and put his hand on Amara's shoulder. "I can't bring your mother back," he said quietly. "I can't undo what my company did to her, or to the thousands of others who suffered because of decisions I made. But I can make sure it never happens again. I can change Sterling Pharmaceuticals, cut drug prices, expand access, make sure no one ever dies because they can't afford medication." He paused, his voice strengthening. "And I can make sure you never have to struggle the way your mother did. Not as charity, not as guilt money, as family, as the inheritance that should have been yours from the beginning. You're my granddaughter. You're the only family I have left. And if you'll let me, I want to spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of that." Amara looked up at him. This old man, this billionaire, this stranger who was somehow family. She thought about everything he had done, all the harm his company had caused, all the people who had suffered because of his policies. She thought about her mother dying in a hospital bed, apologizing for being sick. She thought about the bottle of pills she still carried in her pocket, the plan she had made, the end she had been seeking, and she made a choice. "I can't forgive you," she said honestly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. What your company did to my mother, what it does to thousands of people every year, that's not something that can be forgiven with words or money or good intentions." Edward nodded, accepting this. "I wouldn't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I can give you a chance." Amara stood up from the piano bench, facing him directly. "I can give you the chance to prove that you mean what you say. To actually change things, not just talk about changing them. To be the person your wife believed you could be, instead of the person you became." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the bottle of pills she had brought, her own exit plan, her own way out. She held it up, letting him see it, letting him understand what she was giving up. "I came here to end my life," she said. "I was ready to disappear, to stop fighting, to let go of everything. But then I found you, and now I have a reason to stay." She threw the bottle across the room, where it landed next to the one she had taken from him. 2 bottles, 2 plans, 2 endings that would never happen now. "I'll stay," she said. "I'll let you try to make things right. I'll even help you if I can. But I need you to understand something. This isn't about money or inheritance or being a Sterling. This is about honoring my mother, about making sure her death meant something, about building the world she wanted to live in, even though she never got the chance." Edward nodded slowly, tears still streaming down his face. "I understand. And I promise you, I promise Margaret, wherever she is, I will spend every day I have left trying to earn the chance you're giving me." He held out his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, an offering. Amara looked at it for a long moment. Then she took it, and in the dusty light of the forgotten mansion, with the ghost of a piano song still hanging in the air, a grandfather and granddaughter began the long work of healing. The next 3 years were the most important of Edward Sterling's life. He emerged from that mansion a different man, not redeemed, not forgiven, but committed to change in a way he had never been before. Within a month, he had called an emergency meeting of Sterling Pharmaceuticals' board of directors. Within 2 months, he had announced a comprehensive restructuring of the company's pricing policies. Within a year, Sterling had become the first major pharmaceutical company to cap drug prices at what patients could actually afford, to expand access programs for the uninsured, and to pledge that no one would ever die because they couldn't afford Sterling medications. The shareholders revolted. The stock price plummeted. Other executives threatened to sue. But Edward didn't care. He had $4 billion and nothing to spend it on except making things right. He funded the changes personally when the company couldn't afford them. He bought out dissenting board members. He transformed Sterling Pharmaceuticals from a symbol of corporate greed into a model of what healthcare could be when profit wasn't the only priority. And through it all, Amara was beside him. She didn't move into his mansion or take his name or accept his money. Not at first. She insisted on earning her place, on proving that she was more than just a long-lost heir. She enrolled in college, studying public health and healthcare policy, learning everything she could about the system that had failed her mother. She worked part-time at a community clinic, serving patients who reminded her of her mother, people who had been abandoned by a healthcare system designed to extract profit from suffering. And every Sunday she drove to Edward's mansion and played piano for him, filling the silent halls with music that hadn't been heard in 45 years. Slowly, trust built between them. Edward told her stories about Margaret, how they met, how they fell in love, how they dreamed of building a better world together before that world took her away. Amara told him stories about Diane, how she had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, how she had taught Amara to play piano on a keyboard held together with tape, how she had spent her final weeks apologizing for things that weren't her fault. They shared grief and guilt and the slow, painful process of learning to believe in the possibility of good things. And they talked about the nurse, the woman who had stolen Diane, who had sold her to an adoption agency, who had set in motion a tragedy that had shaped 3 generations of their family. Edward hired investigators, lawyers, anyone who could help them find the truth. After 6 months of searching, they found her. Martha Coleman, now 73 years old, living in a nursing home in Florida, suffering from dementia that had stolen most of her memories. They went to see her together, Edward and Amara, grandfather and granddaughter, seeking answers that might never come. Martha didn't recognize them, didn't remember what she had done, didn't understand why 2 strangers had come to visit her in her fading years. But there were moments of clarity, moments when the fog lifted, and she spoke about the past as if it were happening now. "The baby was beautiful," she said, during one of those moments, looking at Amara with something like recognition. "So beautiful, and the father was so young, so broken. I knew he couldn't take care of her. I knew she would be better off somewhere else, with a real family, people who could give her what she needed." "You stole her," Edward said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "You stole my daughter and sold her to strangers. You told me she was dead. You let me mourn her for 45 years. Martha's eyes clouded with confusion, then something that might have been remorse. "I thought I was helping. I thought—" She trailed off, her moment of clarity fading. "I'm tired. Can I go to sleep now?" They left without the answers they had come for. The woman who had shaped their lives with one terrible decision was now beyond accountability, beyond justice, beyond anything except the slow forgetting that would eventually take her entirely. But knowing wasn't the same as understanding, and understanding wasn't the same as healing. Some wounds never close completely. The best you can do is learn to carry them. Edward Sterling died on a Monday morning in spring, 3 years after he met his granddaughter in an abandoned mansion. He died peacefully, in his own bed, with Amara holding his hand and Claire de Lune playing softly on the speakers. He was 81 years old, and he was not alone. His will, updated dozens of times over the past 3 years, left everything to Amara, not just the money and the company, but the responsibility. "I am leaving you an empire built on exploitation and suffering," he wrote in a letter attached to the will. "I am also leaving you the power to transform it into something better. I trust you to do what I couldn't, to make Sterling Pharmaceuticals a force for good in the world, to honor your mother's memory by ensuring that no one else's mother dies for lack of affordable medication. I trust you because you are your mother's daughter and your grandmother's granddaughter and the best person I have ever known." The funeral was held at the mansion, restored now, filled with light and music, transformed from a mausoleum of grief into a home. Amara played piano during the service, the same Steinway that Margaret had played, the same keys that had been silent for 45 years before that night when two strangers found each other in the darkness. The B-flat rang out clear and true, unstuck forever, a symbol of all the things that had been frozen and were now finally free. A year after Edward's death, Amara stood before the United Nations General Assembly, presenting Sterling Pharmaceuticals' new global initiative, a commitment to provide essential medications at cost to developing nations, funded by the profits from wealthy markets, designed to ensure that no one anywhere in the world would die because they couldn't afford treatment. "My mother died because she couldn't afford medication," Amara said, her voice steady, her grandmother's locket around her neck. "My grandfather spent the last 3 years of his life trying to make sure no one else's mother would suffer the same fate. He didn't succeed, not completely. The system is too broken, too entrenched, too designed to prioritize profit over people. But he made a start. He proved that change is possible, even from within." She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates, the cameras, the world watching. "I am here to continue what he started. Not because I forgive him for the harm his company caused. I'm not sure I'll ever fully forgive that. But because I believe that the best way to honor the people we've lost is to fight for the people we can still save. My mother would have wanted that. My grandmother would have wanted that. And my grandfather, the man I knew for 3 short years, the stranger I found in an abandoned mansion on the worst night of my life, he wanted it more than anything." She straightened, her voice rising. "So here is my promise. As long as I lead Sterling Pharmaceuticals, no one will die because they can't afford our medications. We will cut prices, expand access, and accept lower profits if that's what it takes to save lives. And we will challenge every other company in this industry to do the same, because healthcare is not a privilege for the wealthy. It is a human right. And it's time we started treating it that way." The applause that followed was thunderous. But Amara barely heard it. She was thinking about her mother, dying in a hospital bed, apologizing for being sick, about her grandfather, sitting in darkness with a bottle of pills, ready to end everything, about a stuck piano key that had finally been freed, a silence that had finally been broken, a family that had found each other at the edge of oblivion and chosen to step back together. She touched the locket at her neck, Margaret's locket, passed down through generations, containing a photograph of a young woman who had died before her time, but whose love had somehow survived. And she made a silent promise to her mother, to her grandmother, to all the people who had been lost to a system designed to extract profit from suffering. "I will fight for you. I will change things. I will make your deaths mean something." And in the mansion that had once been a tomb and was now a home, the piano sat waiting for her return, its keys gleaming, its music ready to fill the air once more. The B-flat above middle C, unstuck now, singing clear and true, seemed to hold within it all the grief and hope and stubborn, impossible love that had brought a lost granddaughter and a broken billionaire together on the darkest night of their lives. Some things, once broken, stay broken forever, and some things, against all odds, find a way to heal.